Hello and welcome to lesson 3 of Java programming for beginners. Today we're going to be learning about the basic structure of a Java program, and I'm going to show you how Java actually works. So on the screen here we have a piece of code from this line where you have the slash and the asterisk right down to where you have these curly braces. That's a piece of code. You see on the first line there, I have a slash, an asterisk, some text, and then you have an asterisk and a slash. Now that is what is usually referred to in Java as a multi-line comment. And inside here we have another kind of comment, the double slash and some text, which is what we call a single line comment. Later on in the comments section, I'm going to talk more about comments and how you could use comments to improve your code readability. But for now, let's focus on the actual structure of our program. Now, Java programs are built around the concept of classes. You know, programs are there to solve real-world situations, real-world problems, and what we actually have in the real world, we have real entities, we have objects. For example, you have books in the library application. For example, you're going to have books, you're going to have DVDs, you're going to have the librarian, you're going to have library users and all of that. So all of that are represented in our program via the use of classes. So in this case, we have a program that will only print a welcome message. So our object here is a welcome. Our real world entity is the message that we print out to the people, the message that you give your newcomers when they come to your class, or your visitors when they come to your house. You definitely tell them welcome. So in this case, we are writing a class that's going to tell our newcomers welcome. So how do we do that? At the beginning of my class, my program here, this line where you have public class welcome. Actually, public and class are keywords in Java, and keywords are things that have specific meaning. Later on, we're going to talk about keywords, and we're going to see these keywords and a lot more, and we're going to talk about what they signify. But for now, what I want you to focus on, just know that we write a class like this, public class welcome. There's no doubt there are other things you could use here, and there's a possibility of eliminating this one, but for now have it as this, public class welcome. Now just after the class name welcome, we have an opening curly brace down here and a closing curly brace down here. This is what marks the beginning and the end of our Java class. You're going to use curly braces a lot if you're coming from other programming languages. If you're coming from another programming language like C or maybe PHP or maybe C++, then you would be very much familiar with these. Well, if you're coming from a Python world, this might look strange, but I'm sure everybody is familiar with the concept. Every programmer is familiar with the concept of curly braces. So curly braces actually mark the beginning and the end of your code, a code block. So in this case, we are saying our class starts here at this opening curly brace and ends down here at the last curly brace. So everything that this class is going to do will be kept inside the curly braces here. So here in the class, we have a comment that just tells an indication to anyone reading this code what this method does. And down here we have another method. We have a method. Now, what are methods? In other programming languages, the equivalence of a method in C, for example, or in PHP is what we call a function. In Java, we do not use functions we do not use the word function to refer to these. Instead, we call them methods. What our program does is represented in methods. And this is a particular kind of method. The main method is a specific method that every Java program must have. No matter what Java program you write, that program should always have a main method. Why? Because the main method is what the Java virtual machine will look for when you execute your program. When you try to run your program, it looks for a main to start. If you don't have a main method, the Java virtual machine will not know where to start your program, and your program will not run. Your program will compile, but when you try to run it, it will not run. Later on, we'll look at the difference between compilation and running. But for now, I want you to bear in mind that every time you write a Java program, you must have at least one method. Public static void main. It must follow this same signature, and it must have these parentheses with these inside string args. Well, this is a variable string. You must have a string variable and this square bracket. There's no doubt this syntax here, this order here might change, but we'll look at that later on. But for now, just have it in your head that this is how you write your Java program. When I say this might change, I mean these square brackets could come in between the string and the args variable. Later on, we'll talk about it, so I'll leave it for now. And like I said, every Java program must have a main method. Now, be careful. Some people usually get this the wrong way. I said every Java program must have a main method. I did not say every Java class must have a main method. Those are two different things, so be careful with that. Now, inside my main method here, I have, well, the definition of my main method. Like with the class, we had a curly brace that starts here and ends here, and the curly braces defined the beginning and the end of our class. Same with the method. After the parenthesis, we have a set of curly braces, this one up here and this one down here, that define the start and the end of our method. So everything that this method is going to do will be put inside here. And in this case, we have one line. We have a single statement, system.out.println. We're going to see what this is later on as well. This is a class that has some variables and some methods that we can use to do certain things. In this case, we are calling the println method, the println method that prints a line of text. It prints this string that we pass in onto the console. And with that said, I'm just going to repeat. Our class is marked by a set of curly braces, our method as well by a set of curly braces, and every Java program must have a main method because this is the method that your Java virtual machine will look for when it tries to run your program. If you don't have this method, your program will not run. Now, I just want to insist on the fact that Java is a very case-sensitive language, and you must be careful with your characters. For example, the class, this definition here, this is actually a class that we are calling the string class. It is written with a capital S. If you change this to a lowercase s, then your program will not run because Java is case sensitive. Same thing. When you write a Java program, first of all, you have to save your Java program in a source file. And the name of the source file must be exactly the same as the name of the class, the public class that is saved in the file. What do we mean? Yeah, this statement here says, this comment here says, this is a sample Java program. Save this file as welcome.java. When you write your source code, you write a class. In this case, our class is welcome. We must save it in a file titled welcome.java. Otherwise, we're going to fall into a pit later on. There is a rule to this. Actually, the rule is the class name must be the same as the name of the the file name must be the same as the name of the public class in the file, which means you can have more than one class in the file, but don't do that. For now, put it in your head that every time you write a Java program, you're going to have one class in a file, and the class will be public and it will be kept inside a file named the same as the class but with a .java extension. That's the rule for now. Later on we will get around that. and we'll do more and see many things other than having a public class. But you should also be very careful. Like I said, Java is case sensitive. So if your class name is welcome with a lowercase w, you're going to have a problem. Since my class name is uppercase W, my file name must also be an uppercase W. If I change this E to capital, I must put this one as capital. Have that in mind and don't make the mistake. Now, with that said, after you write your Java program, like you can see here, this is our Java code. It looks more like English statements, but we will all agree, we all know that computers don't understand English. Computers actually understand binary. And to do that, we must look for a way to translate this code that we have written into a form that the computer can actually understand. It's the same concept. I am an English speaker, and let's say you're a Spanish or a French speaker. Now, when I'm talking to you, if I start speaking English to a completely Spanish speaker, a purely Spanish or a French speaker, they won't understand anything I'm saying. So, what can we easily do to solve the problem? We can get a translator who understands both English and Spanish. So when I speak English, the translator is going to translate that into Spanish for my Spanish speaker to get what I'm saying. Same thing, we write our source code in Java. The computer does not actually understand Java. The computer understands binary. So we need a translator that will translate our Java into binary for the computer to understand. And our translator in this case is what we call a compiler. So we're going to use the Java compiler, in this case Java C. Our Java compiler will translate our Java code that we save in our welcome.java file into machine readable code. Well, in this case, it's not actually directly into machine readable code. It translates it into byte code. For those coming from other programming languages, those of you are definitely coming from a C language, or you're coming from C++, or you're coming from Pascal. You know that when you compile your program, it gets compiled into machine readable code, and that code is executed on your system. Java actually has a slightly different concept. When we compile our Java program, it gets compiled into what is known as bytecode. And it is this bytecode that is actually run on, well, it's not actually run on a machine. Later on, the bytecode will be translated, will be interpreted into machine readable code by the Java virtual machine. And I'm going to show you all of that. So for now, just have it in mind that when you write your code, you're going to store it in a source file with a .java extension, and you're going to compile it using the Java C compiler. And after compiling the code, you would now run it using the Java command on the Java virtual machine, and the Java virtual machine will interpret that into machine readable code. So let me just show you a diagram here that explains better how Java works. So here, what do we have? We have our Java source code that is written and stored inside a file named with a .java extension. We're going to run that Java, we're going to compile that Java code using the Java C compiler, using this Java C command, we call the Java compiler, and we pass in our source code, and it's going to compile the source code into bytecode, and it's going to store the bytecode in a file named with a .class extension. After the code is compiled and stored as bytecode in the .class file, then we will run the bytecode on the Java virtual machine, and the Java virtual machine will interpret that into machine code that will run on your system. I'm sure you must have heard before, or if not, now I'm telling you, Java is usually referred to as both a compiled language and an interpreted language. Why is that? Because when you write your program, it is first of all compiled into bytecode. That is the process of compilation. So that's why Java is referred to as a compiled language. Later on, at runtime, when you execute your program, the Java virtual machine interprets this bytecode into machine-readable code, and that executes on your system. So with that said, I'm going to leave it at that, and instead of going on with so much talk, I'm going to go to my computer right now. I'll go to my desktop, I'll create a folder, and I'll write a piece of program so that we can actually compile the code and see the process in action. So what I'll do is I'll create a folder on my desktop and I'll call it example. With my example folder properly created on my desktop, I'm going to open the folder, and inside there I'm going to create a file, new document, and I'm going to name it welcome.java. Now, if you're a Windows user, you could use something like Notepad++. It's going to work just fine, except that you won't have maybe coloring of some certain keywords to help you see your code properly. So what I suggest is, as a Windows user, go online, go to the Notepad++ website and download Notepad++. You can Google for Notepad++ and they will direct you. You should have a link to the website. It's just about 3 megabytes, so that should not be a problem for you to download. When you download it and install, create your file, welcome.java, anywhere. It must not be on the desktop, anywhere on your computer that you can navigate into, and save the file there, welcome.java. For me, I'm using gedit. So Ubuntu users, you already have that. Linux users, you have all sorts of it. You can use, the point is you can use any IDE you want. I don't want you to use NetBeans that we installed earlier, because it does too much for you and you will not see exactly what's happening. So I prefer showing it this way so that you see exactly what's going on. And later on, we're going to start using NetBeans to make our life easier. So inside my welcome.java file, I'm going to type my class, public class welcome. And I'm going to mark the beginning and the end of my class with a set of curly braces. Like I said, curly braces mark the beginning and end of a code block. So in this case, I'm saying my class starts here and ends down here. Now inside here, I'm going to put public static void main. Now I'm using tabs to indent. Let me take that out. As a convention, it is usually recommended that you indent your code using 4 spaces. Why? It's not like if you don't do that, your code will not compile, but it's just for readability purposes, so that anybody reading your code will easily see. I mean, if you have code organized, properly organized, it's more comfortable when you're reading it. So now I have my public static void main. Like I said, the main method is a method that the main method with this signature public static void main is a method that your Java program, your Java virtual machine would look for when you want to run your program. So I'm going to complete my main method by putting these arguments. You always have these arguments. It's a standard for the main method. And remember, it's case sensitive. S is capital. If you make a mistake and you use a lowercase s here, you would fall into a hole. So I have my main method, and I'm just going to put a single line system.out.println, println, prints the line or the string that we pass into it, and I'll say welcome to Java. This will be great. Now I have my Java program written, and like you can see here, the name of my class is welcome, and I've stored it inside a file welcome.java. And remember, Java is case sensitive, So capital W, the rest lowercase, same thing here. Now with that done, my Java program is fine and is ready to compile and run. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire up another terminal. I'm going to open up my terminal here, and just before we compile, I want to show you what happens in the process of compilation. Now inside here you can see that I have just one file, welcome.java. So first of all, I'm going to navigate to that directory, cd desktop and example. I'm in the directory. Now in that directory I'm going to call my javac command, javac, and I'm going to pass in my file welcome.java. Now remember, in the video on setting up your environment, I asked you to specify to add the path to the bin directory of your Java installation to your class path. It was because of this. If you don't do that, every time you want to use the Java command, the javac command, you have to specify the full path, which means if you installed it in maybe user / or local / whatever, right up to java / till where you have the bin location of that, you have to specify all of that on your command line before you have to do something like this. / my workspace, whatever, / java / the folder / bin, before you then / bin / javac. So to avoid all of that, we had to add these. We had to add the path. We had to add the path to the bin directory of our Java installation to our class path. So now, since I have added it to my class path successfully, I can simply call the javac command from anywhere, and I pass in my file welcome.java. Now I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to compile the file, and you would see another file pop up here. Enter. That's taking too long. Okay, that's done. Now you can see I have another file here, welcome.class. So when you compile your Java program, it is stored in a file with a .class extension. Notice it has the same name as the original file welcome, but it has the .class extension. So our program has been compiled into bytecode, and the bytecode has been stored inside this file. If we try to open, what happens? There is no, thank you. Just go away. Okay, now we have our bytecode stored inside this file. So the next thing we have to do is run the program. So now to run the program, I'm going to call the Java command, and I'm going to pass in the .class file welcome. But this time, I will not add the .class extension. Remember, when we were compiling the program, I said javac welcome.java. It compiled into this file, and now when I want to run it, I'm going to call the Java command, Java, not javac. Javac is for compiling, Java is for running. So I'm going to call the Java command, I'm going to pass in the welcome.class file, but I'm not going to add the .class extension. And when I hit enter, I'm going to see the output on my console. Now you see what we wrote in our Java file, source file, welcome to Java. This will be great. Exactly what we had there. Okay, I'm just going to go back, and I'm going to compile the program again, and I show you one more thing. Now when you compile your program, after it compiles, you will realize there is no output. When you compile a program and you don't have any output like this, it shows that your program compiled correctly. But if you have a bunch of statements here, messages here, it means you certainly have a problem with your code. I'm going to introduce an error into my code, and I'm going to recompile and show you exactly that. Let me change this to lowercase w to show illustrate the case-sensitive nature of Java. So I'm going to compile my code again. Whoa. Welcome.java, line 1, error. Class welcome is public. Class should be declared in a file welcome.java. You see, my file is actually welcome and my class is welcome, but because this is a lowercase w, I have a problem. So you want to watch out. And when you have Java errors, sometimes take your time. In this case, it's so nice. It's telling me line 1. Sometimes it might tell you line 1 and you might see the error one line above or one line below, but just check around there and it always gives you a hint on where to get the correction done. So I'm going to correct my code. I'm going to put it back capital as it's supposed to be, and I'm going to compile again. And now it compiles fine, and I'm going to run. And I have my sample Java program working just fine. So to reiterate before we wrap up with this video, we have the javac command. We pass in our source code that is stored in a source file with the .java extension. The Java compiler compiles the code into a .class file and stores the bytecode inside that .class file. After that, we run the program using the Java command and we pass in the name of the file, but this time we don't use the .class extension. And that should do the job. So in our next tutorial, we're going to look at an overview of what we will be covering throughout this course.